Zach, we are back and we're diving into part two of what we would trade every top 12 Dynasty wide receiver for. In case you missed it, we're getting into the back half of the top 12, going through 7 through 12 today. And if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, comment down below some players you might be trying to move off of. What would you be looking to get if you were selling them off of your roster? And keep in mind, these might be some of the prices you have to pay to get some of these very high quality wide receivers in your roster. So keep in mind, we're not saying sell. We're just saying, hey, if you are thinking about it or people are knocking on your door, these are some values you should be looking to get. But with all that said, all the promo in the books, Zach, let's get to the content that people came for. You were tasked at the top of this one, finding a price for Garrett Wilson. What are you looking to get? Are you looking to move? Is there reason to sell?
Well, look, you could definitely have a frustrated Garrett Wilson owner. And what I would say to you is just weather the storm, man. I think we're through it. I think we're through the worst of it. You never know. Aaron Rodgers could snap his Achilles this time in 3 snaps. No pun intended. Listen, we talked about in part one, Jamar Chase never living up to, or at least up to this point, never living up to the hype that he is valued at. And you could say the same for Garrett Wilson. Everything that's gone wrong around Garrett Wilson has been anything but him. So to me, that's why it's different than Jamar Chase. There is a little bit of culpability when you miss, a good quarter of the season like Jamar Chase did. And Garrett Wilson is out here with Tim Boyle throwing passes, still doing his best, still getting open, and they're just unable to hit him so he can score points for your fantasy team. So he's been surrounded by complete ineptitude by the New York Jets. So I still want Garrett Wilson on my squad. I'm not somebody that's panicking. If I can buy low, I am. And look, the Jets, to me, this is like, they can't keep messing this up. They can't keep doing this, right? At some point, they're going to figure it out with quarterbacks and backup quarterbacks, or he's just going to want off the team. And Garrett Wilson is not going to want to go into his 4th and 5th years of his contracts to where he's not performing on the field, and that's going to affect him when it comes time for him and his agent to go to the negotiating table, whether it's with him, whether it's with the Jets or with another team, and whatever team that he's talking to says, well, you only had 80 catches this year and 4 touchdowns. He's not going to want to do that. So at some point, he's either going to get frustrated and ask to get into a different situation, or the Jets are going to figure it. That's my belief, that they're going to figure it out, or that he's going to ask for a trade. And you think that's impossible, but there's been a lot of wide receivers that have done it, and they've been moved. I mean, A.J. Brown, Tyreek Hill, the list goes on and on and on. And we might be looking at another one this offseason with the San Francisco 49ers. Who knows? We'll see. But these things happen every single year. I'm not making it up. It's not somebody that I'm looking to move off, because I feel like eventually this will be figured out one way or the other, and he will become a top 10 dynasty wide receiver. So if I were to move off Garrett Wilson, Bob, it would have to be for a player that really gets me excited at another position. I plugged the name into Keep Trade Cut, and I saw Sam Laporta, and I was just licking my lips when I saw that. And I could even get a little bit more. I could get Sam Laporta and a 4th-round pick, according to Keep Trade Cut. So that's the kind of deal I'd be looking for. I solidify myself at another position. There is a sense of, if I were to move off Garrett Wilson to a Sam Laporta, like, oh man, I am sad that I'm losing Garrett Wilson, but oh dang, I am stoked to be getting a tight end that I feel confident going for the next 5 to 7 years as a tight end one, as a top 5 to 7 tight end in the NFL and in fantasy, no matter what. So that's the kind of feeling I want if I move off Garrett Wilson, because I believe in his ability, in his ceiling, in his ability to move past whatever's gone on in the first 2 years. So I'm not dismayed by his lack of production. I'm not letting someone trying to come in and buy low because of that. If anything, you're going to have to give me at least a fair deal, if not overpay a little bit, to take him off my hands, Bob.
Yeah, he's one of those players, and another player I'll talk about later, who the prophecy as it's been foretold has come to fruition, where all the stars are finally aligning. Has his quarterback coming back that can hopefully stay healthy. It was supposed to be last year. We had to wait a little bit. So that's hopefully coming to fruition. It would take a lot for somebody to, get Garrett Wilson out of my cold dead hands. And Sam Laporta, I tell you what, is a pretty good start, getting an elite player at a position. The Dynasty tight end one now, not a bad thing to have, especially in a tight end premium. That would be great. I don't think you're getting the exact same value then. You probably have to do a little bit different there. But either which way, maybe add on to Garrett Wilson. But I see your point, too, with Garrett Wilson being valued very highly compared to what he's been put on or what he's put in the production aspect of things. Being a wide receiver 3 last year, being a fringe wide receiver 2-3 the year prior in PPR scoring. So I get it, and I get the frustration like you noted, but it's not on him. It's not like he's playing bad. It's not like he's running bad routes. It's not like he's dropping balls. And his catch rate, we talked about it in a previous video, was dog water. His true catch rate his true catch rate was 83%, whereas his real one that's on paper or in stat lines is like 58% over his first 2 years, or is what it was last year. But either way, hopefully an improvement is coming for Garrett Wilson, and hopefully we can get on track with his value, because I think people are going to start being a little even more peeved if he doesn't rise to the occasion now. But moving on, number 2 here, or actually, I guess number 8 at this point, since we are in part 2, but number 2 in part 2, Malik Nabers. And Zach, is there a reason to sell? And I'll tell you, I put this on paper here. I fucking wish I had any Malik Nabers to even contemplate selling. But pity party aside, the only reason to sell Malik Nabers is to manipulate the inflated values that is rookie players and rookie draft picks, kind of like you touched on with Marvin Harrison. I think Malik Nabers is going to get a ton of targets this year. I mean, he's going to be the tunnel target. Nobody else on that team, as much as we like Wan'Dale Robinson, as much as we like Jalen Hyatt and anybody else there, Darius Slayton, Daniel Bellinger, Theo Johnson, any of those guys, they're not going to take away targets from Malik Nabers. Malik Nabers is going to be the number 1 target, but you got that questionable quarterback situation there. Can he reclaim the magic from the year prior? That is Daniel Jones. But y'all know the top 12ish that we're talking about. And there's studs coming up in this list that we already know are good and are already producing and are still relatively young. And as good as I think Malik Nabers is, do not take this as me saying he's not good. I love Malik Nabers, and he's probably my favorite wide receiver in this class. Favorite does not equal best. But as good as he is, I feel like with where he is, we can definitely agree that this might be a little silly depending on where you're at as a team. Some of these players coming up that are in better situations overall, already producing, still valuable. Another player, we said no trading on this list, but Malik Nabers ahead of A.J. Brown feels a little odd to me. A.J. Brown is an absolute stud wide receiver. I like Malik Nabers a lot. This is just one of the reasons to sell. I don't really, I don't think he's going to be bad. I don't think he's overvalued in that sense. But if somebody's knocking on your door, #bars, this is what I'm looking for. Can I snag Zay Flowers and a 25 first? Zay Flowers is definitely somebody who I don't think we've talked about enough as how good he did as a rookie in this offense where Mark Andrews is the number 1 target. I know he missed time, but Zay Flowers earned a 24% target share in his rookie season. And that's something that doesn't happen a lot for rookies. Rookies, even first-round rookies, unless there's nobody else around, which I guess you could argue that there wasn't for part of the year when Mark Andrews was out, they can be anywhere from 17, 18, 19, 20%, but rarely do they get over 20% their first season. Zay Flowers did that. He checked that box. He's in a good position going forward. 24% just isn't a fluke of a target share to get. He earned that target share. He's that good. And I think you can see that going forward as this offense continues to develop under Todd Monken and obviously Lamar Jackson. So that'd be what I'd be looking to get if I was moving Malik Nabers. If I had the luxury to move Malik Nabers, that's what I'd be looking to get. But Zach, feel free to touch on this if you'd like.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. I don't think that's enough for me. I hear what you're saying about Zay Flowers, but there's also, like you talked about, the reasons why he did have such a good rookie season on paper. The absences of Mark Andrews, the running game was dependent on Gus Edwards and Justice Hill and even Keaton Mitchell at certain points in the season. And look, they haven't really addressed a bunch of the wide receivers. Not like they brought in a bunch of guys, but I just don't know how much higher the ceiling can be for Zay Flowers. I hope that doesn't offend anyone or shock someone. I think we kind of saw a little bit of the ceiling of Zay Flowers. I don't know off the top of my head what he finished.
Wide receiver 30 in points per game.
Okay, in points per game, yeah, but I think we saw a section of the season where he was putting up points every week and kind of the wide receiver that really separated himself from those rookie wide receivers last year when, it was him and JSN and Quentin Johnston and Jordan Addison. I know Jordan Addison had a 5 or 6 week stretch where he was dynamic as well. But to me, I don't know if I ever see Zay Flowers have a ceiling higher than a wide receiver 2. And so I I don't want to do that. I believe in Malik Nabers' potential to be a wide receiver 1. If I am going the Zay Flowers route, I want more than an extra first round pick. I don't even know if a first and a second does it. Like, can I get a Zay Flowers, a first round pick, and I need a fringe first round valued player. I don't know who that is off the top of my head. How about let's throw, just for bleeps and giggles, Trey Benson. Can I get Trey Benson thrown in there?
Sure. I'm sure you could. Yeah, I don't doubt that that's probably a little lower on the spectrum for people. I don't necessarily disagree that you could ask for more there, Zach. And maybe you're hoping that first is a little higher. Maybe that's something that factors in too for people. I know you don't want to necessarily try to get in the game of guessing where a first is going to land. How about, I'm just looking through some names here. How about instead of that, or in addition, so you want something in addition to what's already there, right? That's around a fringe
In
first value.
addition, and or different than Zay Flowers.
What about if we added on Jaden Reed, another rookie from last year? If we got Jaden Reed, Zay Flowers, and a 25 first.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Okay. Is that too much, do you think? Is that too much?
Probably too much. I probably have to throw back something.
A third or second?
Yeah, something like that.
What if we made that first that was already there a second? So Reed,
no, I need the
Flowers,
first. I need the
too
first.
little. Okay.
I need the first.
All right.
Yeah.
Like I said, I wish I had some Malik Nabers to sell, but I probably wouldn't. So yeah, you're probably right. It would take a lot more, because if it was my only share, I'd tell you what, it would take probably some more players I like in there or something along those lines. So I don't disagree. But Zay Flowers would be somebody because I'm just a little higher on Zay Flowers, I think, at this point. And I think, seeing that target share that I don't think people are talking about that much. And I know Mark Andrews missed a large chunk of time, but you kind of have that similar conversation with Jordan Addison, where Justin Jefferson missed all his time. His target share was only 17%. So you see there's a difference in target share there. And I know there isn't as many weapons in Baltimore. I get that 100%. I think that needs to be talked about more, and definitely, Zay Flowers would want to be a piece for me, and a first, and something in addition I'd be looking for too. So either which way, let's move along here. Let's talk about another one here. Another very good player who I think is too low in the minds of dynasty players. Why don't you talk about him, Zach?
Yeah, basically you're talking about me is what you're basically saying, because we're going to talk about A.J. Brown. Listen, I understand the hype. I really understand the hype, because you look back to last season and there was a stretch of games where, this was when the Eagles were, their offense was just firing on all cylinders. And there was a stretch of the season where he was a wide receiver 1 for so many consecutive weeks. I'm looking at it now. We're looking at last year. There was a stretch of 9 out of 11 games where A.J. Brown was a top 15 wide receiver on the week. And that's the ceiling. That's the boom part of having A.J. Brown. But there's also a bust part of having A.J. Brown, because there was 7 weeks last season, Bob, where he didn't even finish as a top 20 wide receiver. So there's a lot of boom, there's a lot of bust. And it's kind of the same thing with that offense. And it's really the reason why I don't have a lot of Devonta Smith. It's not because I don't like Devonta Smith. It's I just don't know who to start on a week-to-week basis. And obviously you have a player like Devonta Smith or A.J. Brown, you start them every week. But there are weeks where those players can miss on certain weeks. Like you look at week 11, A.J. Brown had 1.8 fantasy points. Week 17, the week of your championship game, 9.3 points. There's another week where he had negative 0.1 points.
Watch out.
Now, he only played in like 20% of the snaps in that game. So that's why. That's not it's not necessarily that he played a whole game and he finished with negative points. But you get what I'm saying. There are weeks where he is just ineffective in your fantasy lineup. And when you have a player of A.J. Brown's caliber and you have a week like that, you are very likely to lose that week, because it costs a lot to get an A.J. Brown. And so I don't love to have these players. If I have a big dog wide receiver, I want big dog numbers, or I want numbers like Amon-Ra St. Brown, who doesn't necessarily put up 50 points, but puts up 16, 17, 20 points every single week on a consistent basis. That's what I want out of my top dog fantasy players. So I'm just not somebody who loves A.J. Brown. I don't have many shares. I don't want many shares. So if I did have a share of A.J. Brown, I'm still not letting you come in cheap, even though I just said all the things knocking A.J. Brown. You're going to have to knock my socks off. Maybe this isn't a knock your socks off offer, but it's one that gets me excited. We talked about JSN, I think maybe in part 1 of the video, about his potential ceiling. So can I turn A.J. Brown into Jaden Reed and JSN? I understand the optics of this trade because there is a world where I lose big on this trade. There's also a world where I win big on this trade, where JSN is just as good. He's a top 10, top 12, top 15 wide receiver year in, year out. I love Jaden Reed. You love Jaden Reed. We all see the capabilities. I think he's a safe wide receiver too. So if I can get those two for A.J. Brown, this is not the sex appeal of Jamar Chase that we talked about in video number 1. I understand that. But if I can get safety and security at 2 other positions and still have the potential for high ceiling, that's what I'd be looking to get. And I also wanted to do a trade without draft picks. We always do draft picks. What can I do in terms of players? Plus, it cannot be another top 12 wide receiver. So give me 2 guys that I can start on a week in and week out basis, hopefully moving forward.
Yeah, man. I think you're selling light here. I think, we just had the talk with mine that we're selling a little light. And I think because of the fact that I think you can lose so big on this one, like there's just the schematics of this one doesn't check out. I think if you swapped either one of those guys for someone closer to the ilk of Brandon Ayuk, that's kind of what I would want for one of those players. I think there are some people who would do that. I know there's a good number of people out there who are sussed out by Brandon Ayuk. That's why he's not on this list, I think, is because a lot of people think he's reached his capacity. And maybe he has with, being in the offense he's in, being on the 49ers with all the other mouths to feed until he maybe finds himself in a different situation with a team that wants to pay him. Who knows where he ends up? And I think that's well within the realm of possibilities that he does kind of let us down. But speaking of somebody who I don't think is going to let you down, A.J. Brown, Zach, in my 2024 projections, is my wide receiver 1, just so you know.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So I don't know. Take it for what it is. I'm not saying like, oh my God, pound the table. Yeah. He's like 0.1 points per game ahead of Tyreek Hill. So it's not like it's some crazy number. And CeeDee Lamb's up there too. It's not a ton of disparity, but he's up there. So that's just a thought. That's just something to take into consideration, maybe or not. I don't care. But I think you can definitely ask for more, and I think you should, purely to kind of quote unquote protect yourself a little bit here, because I think Jaden Reed, JSN both have enough question marks with where they end up in their own pecking orders. As much as I love Jaden Reed and JSN, and I think they're going to factor into offenses going forward. I don't know if it's going to be a 1 for either of them. I'd want a 1 in that deal, and I think Brandon Ayuk is that at some point. And I think there's a bit of a window where you can buy him at a bit of a better value. And A.J. Brown, I think, is a does that for you move. Maybe you have to send something with him to get that Brandon Ayuk because he's a little more valuable than both those players, or either one of those players, I should say. But either way, Zach, we're moving on to this next segment here, and I was tasked with selling Drake London. And now I'm not saying go out there and sell Drake London. We've been on that side of the fence for a long time. We've said, hey, instead of having London, who we think is going to have questionable numbers this year because of the quarterback situation, because of the offensive system, spoiler alert, he did move off of him to higher value players or players that are in better situations. It's something we talk about a lot, playing on the values of the market that exists for better production, whatever the case is. Either way, I don't want to sell London, Zach. I'm not at a point where I want to sell London because I think we're finally on the precipice of that prophecy that has been foretold, what everyone's been hoping for. We have the quarterback. We have the change in the offensive mindset. Why sell at this point? If you're a truther, this is exactly what you've been waiting for. So do I love where London sits in rankings, where he's at right now with what he's done? Not really. Or his valuations? Not really. But that's not the discussion today. That's not what we're here to talk about. If I'm going to sell, I really need something that excites me and makes it worth moving off of London after, let's say I've had him for this whole time, and I've had this expectation, like we kind of talked about with Garrett Wilson. I need something that makes me excited about moving off of what we finally expect to see as this projected breakout that's ahead of us here. So what does excite me is possibly using Drake London to buy into a top-tier running back that I can slot into my running back 1 role for a long time. That's something that gets me excited. Can I use Drake London to get me a Breece Hall? Can I do that by adding DeAndre Swift or maybe James Cook to that deal? If it is James Cook, because he's a little bit higher valued than DeAndre Swift at this point, can I possibly get a little bit on top of the return of Hall, something like a 3rd-round pick? So let's say it's Drake London plus DeAndre Swift for Breece Hall. Get me that locked in running back 1. or maybe it's Drake London plus James Cook for Breece Hall in a third. Maybe that's a smaller formatting league, or maybe this deal is in general in a smaller start size league. Maybe it's a start 9 as opposed to like a start 11. Maybe I'm trying to get to that higher impact asset. That's what I'd be looking to do if I was selling Drake London at all. Not saying sell him. He's finally in position to do what everybody's wanted him to do for the first 2 years of his career, where he has been falling short again. In my opinion, not through any fault of his own, but it's been what we've said. Didn't have the quarterback, didn't have the offensive situation. That is reversed. He has the offensive coordinator and the quarterback situation. So that's what I'd be looking to do if I was moving off Drake London at this point. But again, not a priority move for me. Zach, feel free to share your thoughts before we get into another one of our favorite players.
How about this? How about instead of adding DeAndre Swift or James Cook on the back end in addition to Drake London, how about Drake London and Ramondre Stevenson for Breece Hall?
I'm game for that. I think I'm in on that. I don't hate Ramondre Stevenson. I am kind of concerned with what Antonio Gibson is going to do to him receiving wise,
100%,
but
100%.
I don't, Antonio Gibson, as fine as he's been, has just not done what people have wanted him to do either.
But he provides something that they haven't had in New England while Ramondre's been there.
I mean, Ramondre had a ton of targets and receptions the year prior. I know he was super inefficient with those, and that's probably why they've made this move. But, I mean, honestly, I think just off the top of my head, looking at my projections here, I'm not trying to they're not available anywhere yet. I'm still kind of sorting through them and trying to iron things out. I think I actually have Ramondre Stevenson. I mean, I have him at just under 10 points a game, so not super impactful, but I only have Ramondre at like 12 points per game. So for whatever that's worth to anybody, I don't hate that deal, Zach. I like that pivot. I'm okay with that. That would be palatable for me as well, even though he just signed a reasonably long-term deal that is, as all running back contracts seem to be this day, really 2-year deals maybe, but have that, fake years on the end of them, or very cuttable years, I guess you could say. But yeah, I'd be willing to make that deal instead, Zach.
Yeah, I think that's more realistic. I don't think Ramondre has the ceiling that he did those years where he was doing both the rushing and the receiving work. And that's why they brought Antonio Gibson in. And that's why they re-signed Ramondre to a contract. They said, hey, listen, we're going to take a little bit of work off your plate, and we're going to keep you here for the long term. So I think it's a win-win for both sides in that scenario. I like that deal. I like adding Ramondre to really get what I consider right now, besides Christian McCaffrey, probably the RB1 in fantasy football in Breece Hall. Yeah.
Go ahead and talk about a player that a player that we don't want to trade. We don't want to sell him. But what do you need to get in return if you're selling this player, Zach?
Yeah, you're making me do something I really don't want to do. You sent me the show sheet with Chris Olave, and all I said was, "I love you, boo." I don't want to trade Chris Olave. I really, really like having Chris Olave on my teams, and the reason why I have liked having Chris Olave is because he has that ceiling of a wide receiver 1, and you've never really had to pay to get him. Now, look, I think people are warming up to the idea that he's potentially going to break out this year. We've all seen that there has been some shoddy quarterback play in New Orleans. Although last year, Derek Carr did put it together the last few weeks of the season, and he was a much better quarterback, I would say, the last 4 or 5 weeks than he was the rest of the season. But Chris Olave is just a wide receiver that ever since you really put him on the radar for me, I've been like goo goo gaga eyes for. And if I have Olave, there's just nothing you could send me outside of a just completely ridiculous offer where it's totally one-sided that would make me move off of him. I think he's a wide receiver 1. He's solidified as a wide receiver 1. There is not very much competition there for that. Like, he's probably the wide receiver 1 and the wide receiver 2. Like, what is it? Rashid Shaheed? Rashid Shaheed is the wide receiver 2.
Perry, Cedric Wilson's out there.
Oh my goodness. Kyle
Jawan
Sheets,
Johnson.
baby. Kyle Sheets, man.
Can't forget Taysom Hill.
Bub Means.
Yeah, something like that.
It's really exciting to see the potential that Chris Olave has this season. So I don't want to move off. If I was to move off, I don't think that you could get a trade where you're just like ridiculously getting someone else to overpay. And so for that reason, I want to be a little bit more realistic with my asks. If I were to trade Chris Olave, I want security at another position. So I put on the show sheet Brock Purdy or Trevor Lawrence. Don't do this thing in the comment section with Trevor Lawrence. Dude's locked in for 5 years. What are you going to do about it? And they're paying him $50 million a year. So yeah, he's going to be there. His job is safe. Brock Purdy, probably in another year or two, when Brock Purdy puts pen to paper, his value will increase. He will be worth more than Trevor Lawrence because of the numbers that he has put up, because of the success that the 49ers have had with him under center. So his value right now is what it is because he doesn't have that contract. So when he does have that security, like it's the same for Jordan Love. I think the moment Jordan Love signs an extension, he's vaulted even higher than where he's going in startup drafts right now. He becomes a top 7, a top 8 pick rather than a top 12 to 15 because he has that security. He is not going anywhere. So if I can get in on Brock Purdy now or Trevor Lawrence a little low, because I think Trevor Lawrence eventually will be a little bit better on the field and in your fantasy teams, I do that. But would I be excited or thrilled about it? No, I'd be crying the entire time. I'd even be crying when I hit the accept button and the league commented on it. I'd be in shambles behind the scenes. But that's the low bar of what it would take to get me to move off Chris Olave.
Yeah, I don't hate it. I'm same boat as you. Have loved Chris Olave for a long time. For fun sake, Zack, he's my wide receiver 11 in my projections this year, which would be a career high finish for him. But either which way, I like you, this value probably makes sense and is probably what you have to pay if you want to get Chris Olave. You're probably paying a quarterback without getting one back. But to sell him, I wouldn't love it. Like you said, I would, as much as it probably schematically might make sense for my team, especially if it's Lawrence. Like you said, he's locked in. He has some leash. Brock Purdy, not as much. That could, the wheels could fall off the wagon. I don't see it happening. He's been more than good enough. And like you said, with all the accomplishments, Trevor Lawrence, there's that meme that they always do the side-by-side with games of, oh, well, if you look at Trevor Lawrence versus Mac Jones is actually better in most categories because it's fun because they were in the same class and now they're on the same team. Mac Jones is the backup, but Trevor Lawrence just got all this money for doing not a ton, but like you said, he's paid. He's got a long leash. So I get it. I don't love it. I don't think I'd be able to do it. I just, like you said, I think I'd need just an overbearing, disgusting, unfair trade offer in my favor that I don't care to advertise on this channel for value's sake. But either way, another player I do like a good bit and somebody who I think is slightly undervalued in the community, but I don't really want to sell. But hey, maybe you want to. Maybe you are a little concerned with Jaylen Waddle's last season. I don't subscribe to the narratives that, after Jaylen Waddle had a fluke year last year, in my opinion, that maybe he's not as good as he was propped up to be his rookie season. And, having a good rookie or a good sophomore season with Tyreek Hill in the mix, but last year dealing with some injuries that didn't cost him many games, but cost him time on the field and certainly impacted his play on the field. Certainly was not playing at a peak capacity for a good chunk of the year. I remember being in season and, watching all my fantasy scores come in, and it's just like, well, Jaylen Waddle, what the heck are you doing? And then I get the notification, oh, he's in the blue tent. He got his eye poked out, this, that, and the other thing. And it's like, stop it. just stay healthy for a few plays. I'd love that for you. But either way, he's still very, very good, I assure you. But again, maybe you do. Maybe you want to change up your lineup a little bit. Maybe you want to just help other positions out. Maybe you have a really good wide receiver room. You want to better, let's say, for example, your tight end room. This one isn't too crazy value-wise, but I think I'd be happy with making the swap from Jaylen Waddle to Trey McBride here, somebody who I have projected out as a top 5 tight end this year. It's a lot closer to number 1 than it is number 5. But I'd want some type of pick upgrade in this deal as well. Maybe send a third with Jaylen Waddle to get a second with McBride if I can. As close as they are in value, there's still a positional value difference here in this. This is being a non-tight end premium. I think Waddle holds a distinct advantage when it comes to that positional value. Being a wide receiver, like I said, there's, while tight end has its own positional value amongst itself, wide receiver in general is going to put up more points, and pound for pound points are what win championships. As much as a positional advantage can give you with Trey McBride in the long term, you can buy somebody like an Evan Ingram for cheaper that can probably give you 90%, 80 to 90% probably of what Trey McBride can give you, but it's much shorter term, we think. So that's that's something I'd be looking to do. If I were to be moving off Jaylen Waddle, that's something I'd be looking at value-wise to move off him. That's what I need. Another player I'm excited about as well. Certainly doesn't have the same boom effect that Jaylen Waddle does, and that's hard to move off of too. That's value in your lineup, especially if he's in your flex slot and you get 20-some points out of your flex on a boom week. That's nice to have because Jaylen Waddle has that ability, and he has a nice enough floor because he still gets a ton of targets too. It's not like he's, getting, 18% target share or less out there. Unlike, he's still above 20%, which is still very good despite being second fiddle, quote unquote, to Tyreek Hill. Still like him a good bit, but that's what I'd be looking to get in return for Jaylen Waddle. Zach, anything else to add?
Yeah, I don't know if that deal would get it done for me. I do like Trey McBride, although I need to see him be that efficient in a high-functioning offense, not a low-functioning offense as he was last year.
Sure.
Now you're bringing in not only Marvin Harrison Jr., I expect Michael Wilson to take a step forward. They bring in Zay Jones. They bring in Trey Benson. James Conner's still there. That's a very high-powered offense. I'm not as high on Trey McBride as everybody else. I think I'm actually a little bit more realistic as to what we should be. So I put another – I know. I put another trade in here, and I think you'll like this because I wanted to include somebody you actually like. How about instead of Trey McBride, we go out and get T.J. Hockenson and Cooper Kupp for Jaylen Waddle?
I don't hate it. I just whenever and I know it's TJ Hockenson. That's the exciting part. That's the part that's supposed to excite.
Know your audience,
and it does, right? Exactly. But adding the quote unquote burden, the guest appearances, and the Puka Nacua show that is Cooper Kupp. Flashback to part 1 if you haven't checked it out yet. I have to do something with that. If I'm not a competitive team, and if I'm adding TJ Hockenson, I hope I'm not a competitive team. I need to do something with that asset then. And while I think there's probably going to be a market for it at some point, because I do think that I have a favorable outcome projected for Cooper Kupp this year, I think I will be able to sell him probably for a 25 first at some point from a competitive team before he gets points onto my roster, get him off my roster somewhere else for a little bit. I don't hate that deal. I don't hate that pivot, especially getting, instead of a second round pick back with Trey McBride, I'm getting a player that I think I can at worst turn into a second round pick, but probably a first round pick and a tight end who might even be a little bit better than Trey McBride. I just have to wait for that outcome. So it kind of depends on what I have going on with that team build, but I don't hate that pivot, Zach.
Yeah, I'm shooting there. I'm getting 2 players for 1. I still believe that Cooper Kupp has some value, maybe not the value he had 2 years ago, but if we see just like he's going to be healthy, hopefully this year, he's not going to miss training camp like he did last year. And he was very good when he came back, and he was fully healthy in the second half of last season. So, if I can capitalize on that in the first few weeks, either whether I'm trying to score points or I'm trying to flip the asset, that's what I'd be trying to do. I pick up a tight end that I think maybe not in 2024, but in 2025, I can really just set it and forget it once CJ Hockenson is back fully healthy. Plus, we don't know what's happening in that offense with the quarterback position, but you think it should be solidified by 2025. So that's what I'm trying to do there. I'm setting myself up for the future at one position, and I'm either, if I'm competitive, I'm scoring points. If I'm not competitive, I'm flipping that asset for whatever else it could be. But I'm turning 1 into 2 there as opposed to the 1-for-1 that you presented with Trey McBride.
I did get a pick in that deal, Zach. It was actually 2 for 2 technically.
Oh, geez.
So
I go by the rule of Bob. Never go even assets.
You suggest plus assets there, which I can appreciate, Zach. And I appreciate the heck out of you guys, and I'd appreciate if you hit that like button if you enjoyed it. Comment down below what you might be trying to move some players for. What are some values you have questions about on some wide receivers, running backs, tight ends, quarterbacks? Who cares? Drop it all in there and drop in to patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind. Get in that Discord server for a free 7-day trial and see what we can do for your Dynasty rosters. And if you want more help with your rosters, check out the roster review option in the pinned comment as well as the YouTube description box below. But with all that said, Zach and I are going to get the heck on out of here. We will see you in the next one. But until then, I hope that y'all have a good one.
The moment Brock Purdy puts ink to pen, the moment Brock Purdy puts ink to paper,
pen to paper.
The moment Brock Purdy puts paper to pen, put that in the blooper section.
Might.
The moment that he puts paper to pen, his value is going to go up. I think he will be worth more than Trevor Lawrence.
Zach, pen to paper. pen to paper.
What did I say? What did I say?
You said paper to pen again.
When he puts paper to pen.
No, pen to paper.
I know, bro.